The vampire ball is coming to an end. That's what Putin said in a recent interview, referring to globalists and their perpetual wars and financial exploitation. His metaphor was striking. Western elites have been stuffing their bellies with flesh and pockets with money for centuries. But 30 years ago, the vampire ball was roaring. Russia was in shatters in the 1990s, thanks to Wall Street and US manipulation. China was not even part of the WTO. It was still very poor and looked hopeless. And Iran was just recovering from the brutal war with Iraq. But globalists claimed that they had created something that dwarfed even the Roman Empire. So when Brzezinski warned about the alliance of these three civilizational nations in his book, The Grand Chessboard, in 1998, nobody took him seriously. But wow, what happened over the last 25 years is an astonishing story. Welcome to Geopolitics Demystified. I'm your host, S.L. Canthan. We bring in perspectives you do not see or hear in the mainstream media. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share the channel with your friends. This is part 2 of the exciting topic we discussed last time. Today, we'll discuss how Russia, China, and Iran transformed themselves against all odds to challenge the US empire and set in motion the multipolar world. End of history and unipolar moment. In 1989, when the Berlin Wall fell, an American scholar, Francis Fukuyama, wrote an article titled The End of History, which claimed that American-style capitalism and democracy had decisively won the ideological battle. For a while, the Russian leadership also seemed to have bought into this fantasy. Gorbachev and others agreed to end the Cold War and collaborate with the West on architecting a new peaceful future. They even trusted the promises of the Western leaders that NATO would not move 1 inch eastward. However, that turned out to be an extremely naive attitude. The US had no plans to coexist peacefully with Russia. Instead, the US decided to crush the Russian economy with shock doctrine, dismantle the Russian military, and dismember the nation forever. There was one more strategic imperative to conquer Russia. If Russia falls, China will be the next. Get the bear, you get the dragon, and thus you get the world. In 1992, the first year of reforms introduced by globalists, Russia's inflation skyrocketed to 2,500%. This instantly wiped out the savings of pensioners. Later, in the name of privatization, the entire country was sold to US-picked oligarchs for pennies on the dollar. The ruble was devalued repeatedly, and Russia was forced to get an IMF bailout for a few $1 billion, when Russia's natural resources are worth tens of trillions of dollars. The mafia in charge of this biggest robbery of the century were known as the Harvard Boys, Larry Summers, Robert Rubin, etc. This was a repeat of what the Chicago Boys did to Chile in the 1970s. So when Putin came to power, Russia was miserable. Everything had been destroyed. Factories, agriculture, oil, gas production, military, foreign exchange reserves, etc. were all totally decimated. Not surprisingly, the society was imploding as well. Poverty and suicide rates were astronomically high in the 1990s. There was only one person in the whole world who could fix this. That was Putin. He first brought all the oligarchs together in a room and told them on live television that they better restart the factories or else. Many of the traitor oligarchs eventually fled Russia and went to the US, UK, Israel, etc. Putin created a public-private partnership for the vital industries, a hybrid model of state-owned enterprises. Within 12 years, everything was reversed. Russia became one of the world's leading producers of oil and gas. Soon, Russia surpassed even the US in wheat exports. And Russia's foreign exchange reserves and gold reserves grew significantly. The middle class boomed and fertility rates went up. Moscow became one of the most beautiful cities in Europe. Putin developed good relationships with all the European leaders and built a vast network of oil-gas pipelines. He also developed trusted relations with China and India because he understood the rise of a multipolar world in the future. In fact, in a 2007 speech at the Munich Security Conference, Putin warned that the world cannot be run by one hegemon. Putin has also stood up against the US empire. In Syria, Putin helped defeat ISIS and Al-Qaeda, which were armed and funded by the US and its allies. In Africa, many countries are rejecting the Western imperialism and turning to Russia for partnership and security. And BRICS has been expanding and adding new members only due to the vision of Putin and Xi Jinping. More importantly, Putin made Russia sovereign and resilient. That's why Russia has been able to withstand the countless sanctions and hybrid wars waged by the US. Next, how China did the impossible. In the neoliberal ideological bubble, the only way to succeed is to let the free market roar. Unregulated and unstrained capitalism are the mantra. They could not understand why China would stick to the discredited communist socialist ideas. So for the last 30 years, Western media has been writing articles about the impending collapse of the Chinese economy. In 1999, famous geopolitical analyst Gerald Segal wrote an article called "Does China Matter?" In that, he said the following: "At best, China is a second-rank middle power. In truth, China is a small consumer market that matters relatively little to the world. China made up a mere 3% of world trade in 1997. Beijing is a seriously overrated power. Measuring global political power is difficult, but China's influence is clearly puny." Needless to say, his predictions and analysis turned out to be erroneous. China's GDP has grown 1,700% since his predictions. It became the world's largest manufacturer and trading nation within 15 years of his article. From no presence in the Fortune 500 firms, China surpassed the US within 25 years. Similarly, in terms of patents and scientific papers, China went from a zero to a hero. More importantly, China became a holistic success. It develops its own companies in every industry imaginable. American giants like Google, Amazon, Apple, Tesla, Nvidia have no competitors in the world except in China. It's only a matter of time when China becomes number one in semiconductor technology as well. That will be a true game changer. China's socialism helped 800 million people out of poverty, prioritized infrastructure, and created the world's largest middle class. The state-owned enterprises that are hated so much by Western neoliberals actually fostered rapid growth of the private sector and free market in critical areas. In geopolitics, China embarked on an unprecedented infrastructure project, the Belt and Road Initiative, which now has 150 countries as members. The next step for China is to become a financial powerhouse and internationalize the yuan. In the not-so-distant future, Shanghai, Beijing, and Shenzhen will rival New York and London in stock exchanges. China is also working with Russia in BRICS to create alternative solutions to the US dollar, SWIFT, etc. The yin and yang China model has been a success beyond the wildest imagination. Next, Iran. As for the Middle East giant, it's quite extraordinary that it survived 40 years of brutal sanctions and hostile forces all around it. However, Iran worked slowly and created the so-called Shiite Crescent that consists of Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. Even though it does not have nuclear weapons, Iran created enough military deterrence through powerful drones and missiles. Finally, through economic cooperation with Russia and China, the Iranians were able to slowly strengthen their economy and diplomatic influence. The détente with Saudi Arabia, joining multilateral organizations like BRICS and SCO, joining China's Belt and Road Initiative, working with Russia and India on trade corridors, etc., have helped Iran circumvent all the sabotage efforts by the US. Conclusion. Thus, the three Eurasian powers have created a powerful informal alliance to pave the way for a multipolar world. But it's not over yet, and the next few years will be very dangerous for them and the world. Although NATO has lost the war in Ukraine, the imperialists will not give up so easily. They will sign a temporary peace agreement with Putin while planning a bigger war in the future. They're also openly talking about a war with China in 2027, and we can see that the war in Lebanon keeps escalating. This may be a ruse to pull Iran into a regional war as a final solution for the Middle East. However, if Russia, China, and Iran play defensive militarily and offensive in economy, trade, and finance, they can beat the globalists and create a new peaceful world order for the 21st century. As Putin said, the vampire ball is coming to an end. Thanks for watching. Please like the video and share it on social media. Cheers.